It was the fall of 2017, and like every other college student, I was desperate for some extra cash. My class schedule was tight, so the only shift I could manage was the late one, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., at a local gas station on the edge of town. Everyone I knew warned me that the night shift came with its fair share of weird encounters, but I brushed it off. After all, a job's a job, right? Okay then, before we continue to our story, like the video and hit that subscribe button so I can confirm you are a brave person. Now let's go back to the story. The first few shifts, the first few nights went by uneventfully. There were always a few regulars, truckers, late night drivers, a handful of insomniacs grabbing snacks and coffee to make it through the night. I'd nod at them, ring up their purchases, and go back to scrolling through my phone, waiting for my shift to end. On the fourth night, something strange happened. Around 2 a.m., a car I didn't recognize pulled up. A tall man got out, wearing an old-fashioned trench coat and a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over his face. He filled up his tank, then came into the store. But instead of browsing, he just stood at the doorway, watching me. It felt like he was looking right through me. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer. He just stared for a few seconds, then turned and left, driving away without another word. A growing sense of unease, I shook off the encounter, telling myself it was just a weird customer. But as the nights went on, I started noticing little things, flickering lights, strange creaks, and occasionally, the unmistakable sound of someone walking around the aisles when no one was there. One night, around 3 a.m., I heard a low, humming tune coming from somewhere in the store. It sounded like an old lullaby, and it filled the silence in the most unsettling way. I couldn't figure out where it was coming from, and when I went to investigate, it stopped. This happened a few times over the next week, and every time I heard that humming, my stomach would twist with unease. The man in the trench coat returns. About 2 weeks into the job, I was ringing up a trucker when I caught a glimpse of movement outside. The man in the trench coat was back. He stood next to his car, just watching the store. I was about to ignore him, hoping he'd leave on his own, when he started walking toward the door. He entered and again stood by the entrance, watching me. This time, he was humming that same haunting lullaby. My heart raced as I tried to keep my cool, but I couldn't stop myself from shivering. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice shaking. He didn't respond. Instead, he smiled a slow, unsettling grin that didn't reach his eyes. Then, as silently as he came, he turned around and walked out, driving away into the night. That smile lingered in my mind long after he was gone. Things start to escalate after that. My shifts felt like a descent into madness. Every time I was alone, I felt like someone was watching me. The lights would flicker more often, sometimes going out completely, leaving me in total darkness. And that humming, it seemed like it was getting louder, echoing through the aisles, even when I covered my ears. One night, I was taking stock in the storage room when I heard footsteps approaching. They were slow, deliberate, and stopped right outside the door. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I waited, heart pounding, but no one entered. When I finally worked up the nerve to open the door, there was no one there. The final encounter on my last night working the night shift, things took a terrifying turn. It was around 4 a.m., and the store was empty. I was cleaning up the coffee station when I felt a cold chill down my spine. I turned around, and there he was, the man in the trench coat, standing in the middle of the store, closer than he'd ever been before. He started humming again, the lullaby sounding louder than ever. I backed up, my hand instinctively reaching for the phone, but my fingers were trembling too much to dial. He took a step closer, his eyes dark and empty. "I know you," he whispered, his voice as cold as ice. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. He raised his hand, pointing one long, bony finger at me. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, his voice echoing through the empty store. And then, just like that, he turned and walked out. I watched as he got into his car, driving off into the darkness, and I never saw him again. Aftermath that night was the last straw for me. I quit the next day and never looked back. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that man, about his chilling smile, and I wonder if he was even real. Was it all just a hallucination, brought on by exhaustion and fear? Or was there something truly sinister lurking in the shadows of that gas station? So this is the end of our first story. If you are loving this video, so before moving to our second story, please like the video and subscribe our channel and tell us in comment how you feel for the first story. Let's start our second story. Opening it was the summer of 2019, and Sean had just taken a job as a night shift attendant at a gas station. The place was known for its old-fashioned pumps, a quirky relic of the past, and its location in the middle of nowhere only added to its haunted reputation. Locals spoke of strange happenings, but Sean brushed off the rumors as small-town tales. It was his third night on the job when things started to feel off. He arrived at midnight, as usual, greeting his coworker Marco as he left for the night. "Good luck, man," Marco said with a smirk. Sean laughed it off, but something about Marco's tone lingered. First encounter around 2 a.m., Sean noticed an old, beaten-up pickup truck parked by the farthest pump, even though no one had come in. Squinting, he thought he saw a figure sitting inside, but the tinted windows made it hard to tell. He shrugged it off, figuring the driver was just resting. Half an hour later, Sean looked up again, and the truck was still there. He hadn't seen anyone come out or approach the store, and that same figure still seemed to be sitting inside. Unease crept in, but he decided to walk outside, hoping to catch the driver's attention. "Hey, you okay out here?" he called out, tapping on the truck's window. No response. The air felt colder, and the truck's window fogged up slightly, as if someone inside was breathing heavily. But when he leaned closer, he realized something chilling. There were no feet in the shadows on the driver's side. It was like the figure was floating above the seat. Startled, Sean stumbled back, deciding to go inside and pretend he hadn't seen anything. The truck stayed there for another hour, unmoving, and then disappeared without a sound. Strange noises and shadows the next night. Sean showed up for his shift, trying to shake off what he'd seen. But as the hours ticked by, things grew stranger. Around 1 a.m., he heard faint footsteps in the store, but no one was around. The lights started flickering, casting strange shadows across the aisles. He tried to dismiss it as faulty wiring, but then he heard a whisper, soft and raspy, calling his name. "Sean." He froze, looking around, but there was no one there. The whisper continued, each time sounding closer, until it felt like it was right in his ear. He covered his ears, heart racing, and the whispers stopped. Sean considered quitting that night, but he knew he needed the money. Besides, he told himself, it was probably just his mind playing tricks on him. Little did he know, the worst was yet to come. Sean considered quitting that night, but he knew he needed the money. Besides, he told himself, it was probably just his mind playing tricks on him. Little did he know, the worst was yet to come. "Can I help you?" Sean asked, forcing a smile. The man didn't respond. Instead, he wandered the aisles, picking up random items, staring at them, then putting them back. He didn't seem to be buying anything, just looking. Sean felt a chill run down his spine every time the man's empty gaze met his. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the man walked up to the counter, staring at Sean with a blank, unsettling expression. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but only a raspy breath escaped. He placed a single penny on the counter, his eyes locked on Sean's. Without a word, the man turned and walked out, disappearing into the shadows. Sean looked down at the penny, his hand trembling as he picked it up. It felt unnaturally cold, like it had been left out in the freezing night air for hours. The last shift the next night, Sean felt a sense of dread he couldn't shake. The store felt colder, and the lights flickered more than usual. At 3 a.m., the lights suddenly went out, plunging the store into darkness. His heart raced as he fumbled for his phone, using its flashlight to see. The last shift the next night, Sean felt a sense of dread he couldn't shake. The store felt colder, and the lights flickered more than usual. At 3 a.m., the lights suddenly went out, plunging the store into darkness. His heart raced as he fumbled for his phone, using its flashlight to see. "Hello?" he called out, his voice shaking. No response. Only the relentless sound of footsteps, coming closer and closer. Panicked, Sean backed up, feeling his way to the storage room. He locked the door behind him, pressing his ear to the door, listening. The footsteps stopped just outside. Then came a soft, raspy whisper. "Sean, time to go." His blood ran cold. He heard the door handle rattle, and then the lights flickered back on, illuminating the store. He opened the door cautiously, but there was no one there. The store was empty. He quit the next morning, leaving that gas station and its eerie happenings behind. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being watched, that the whispering voice was still out there, waiting for him. So this is the end of our second story. Again, if you are loving this video, so before moving to our third and best story, please like the video and subscribe our channel and tell us in comment how you feel for the first and second story. Let's start our third story. It was a quiet October night when Emily, a gas station clerk, was scheduled for the late shift. She liked the peace and quiet, the solitude that came with working alone. But on this particular night, something felt off. Her station was on the edge of town, surrounded by nothing but a lonely stretch of road on one side and a dense forest on the other. At around 2 a.m., she was tidying up the coffee station when she noticed headlights pulling into the lot. She glanced up, expecting to see a car pulling up to the pump, but instead, she saw an old, battered sedan parked by the farthest pump. There was no one inside. Emily shrugged, assuming someone had parked there and walked off, though she hadn't noticed anyone earlier. An unseen passenger. As she turned back to her work, something in the corner of her eye caught her attention. A shadowy figure seemed to be sitting in the passenger seat of the car, facing the store. She blinked, but when she looked directly, it was gone. Feeling uneasy, she brushed it off as her imagination, or a trick of the dim light. 15 minutes later, she heard a faint knock on the glass door. Startled, she looked up to see no one there. She stepped around the counter to check outside, but the lot was empty except for the old sedan. She returned to the counter, and as she did, she could have sworn she saw the shadowy figure back in the passenger seat, its head slowly turning toward her. The empty store. Emily busied herself, trying to ignore the growing feeling of dread. But then, the store's automatic doors slid open with a quiet whoosh. No one came inside. Her heart pounded as she stared at the entrance, waiting for someone to step forward. But no one did. The doors closed, and she started to relax, until they slid open again. This time, she heard faint footsteps, slow, deliberate, making their way through the aisles. She couldn't see anyone, but she could hear them moving. She called out, "Hello, anyone there?" Her voice echoed through the empty store, but no response came. She walked over to the security monitor, which displayed feeds from different parts of the store. Her eyes widened as she saw the footsteps' faint imprints forming in one aisle, even though no one was visible on the camera. The footsteps moved closer, stopping just a few feet from the counter before fading away. The encounter. Emily tried to calm herself, but every minute felt like an eternity. Then, just as she was beginning to relax, the lights started flickering, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Her gaze was drawn to the window, where the sedan still sat. But now, a shadowy figure was clearly in the passenger seat, staring at her, though she couldn't make out any features. It seemed to be wearing a dark hat, its head tilted slightly, as if observing her. Then, the figure in the car raised its hand, placing it against the glass, and slowly pointed toward the front door of the station. Emily's blood ran cold. She looked over at the entrance, just as the automatic doors slid open once more. She stepped back, pressing herself against the counter, waiting. That's when a man finally entered the store, a tall, lanky figure with unkempt hair and hollow eyes. He walked slowly, almost in a trance, and when he reached the counter, he simply stared at her, not saying a word. Can I help you?" she managed to stammer. The man didn't respond. Instead, he turned and pointed to the old sedan, now bathed in a strange glow under the flickering lights. Emily followed his gaze, feeling an inexplicable urge to approach the car. The man took a step back, nodding as if encouraging her to go outside. The car and its passenger hesitant but almost compelled. Emily stepped outside and approached the sedan, peering into the passenger seat. She froze. The shadowy figure inside was still there, but now it seemed more real, almost solid. She reached out a trembling hand to touch the door handle, but as soon as her fingers made contact, the figure turned sharply to face her, its face a blur of dark features and hollow eyes. The next thing she knew, she was lying on the cold asphalt, the store lights flickering overhead. She must have fainted. She scrambled to her feet, looking around. The sedan was gone, the parking lot empty, and there was no trace of the strange man or the shadowy figure. The aftermath. When her manager arrived in the morning, she tried to explain what had happened, but he only laughed, suggesting she was overtired and hallucinating. But Emily knew what she'd seen. Weeks later, she came across an old article about a couple who had died in a car accident near the gas station many years ago. The article showed a picture of the car, a battered old sedan, exactly like the one that had appeared in the lot that night. It mentioned that the couple had been buried in the nearby cemetery, never reaching their final destination. Since that night, Emily has never returned to the gas station. But every Halloween, she swears she can still see headlights pulling into the lot from her bedroom window, a battered sedan with two shadowy figures inside, waiting, watching. This concludes the third and final story. So this is the end of our story. Tell us your reviews in comment, and also if you want to know what happened with us, you can watch this video titles True TrainHorror Stories in America. I dare you to watch this video. And of course, if you love this video, don't forget to subscribe us to get our new uploads fast.